you see people in churches condone all sorts of things that shouldn't, they condone it by looking the other way, by not saying anything. And we don't, and we have to handle this really well, because we have to walk forward in love, but we have to confront someone who is sinning against us or sinning against God. I mean, we want to step into there and gently restore them, and hopefully they'll be open to that, right?
Right.
But a lot of times people they take the avoid conflict route, because they don't know what to do. They don't know how to say it. They don't know what to say.
Right.
Yeah. And it's like, well, you're undermining credibility of like everything in the universe that you say you believe.
Welcome to another episode of What to Say and How to Say It, the podcast to help you fix your marriage. I'm Shai, and I'm here with Nina Rosner. Our mission is to help you, a Christian married man or woman, navigate conflict and build connections so you can have a thriving marriage. Today, we are discussing what to say when compassion turns into enabling. Okay, so we know that we are commanded by God in the Bible. There are several scriptures around compassion. We're told to have compassion toward others. For some of us, this comes natural. It's a gift. For others, we have to work at it. Today, we want to discuss what to say when that compassion he instructs us to have turns into something unhealthy. All right, Nina, what are your thoughts around compassion versus enabling? Sometimes it's hard to balance those two.
Yeah. So that's a thing. And the thing that pops into my head is a story I heard about a woman who was raising her first child, and the kid was 2 years old and morbidly obese. And I remember her being on, one of those talk shows like Dr. Phil or something, from 20, 30 years ago. And there was a doctor there was a child behavioral psychologist there, and there was this woman, and there was her really, 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 really overweight 2-year-old, and the kid could hardly move. And the kid would cry, even during the short segment. I'm hungry, I'm hungry. And so the mom would give this child food. And then she'd give her, a candy bar. Like on TV, she gave her something unhealthy. And the discussion was all around, why are you doing this? And she's like, well, food is love to her. And he's like, yeah, but you're not loving this kid. You're damaging this child. Look at how unhealthy. Like, she's going to, 5 years from now, she's going to have a heart attack. I mean, a 7-year-old with a heart disease, something to that effect. And it really stuck with me, because that was the first time I came to grips with the awareness. I was probably in my early 20s, that you can think you're loving someone, and you can be trying to please somebody, trying to do the right thing, and you're actually harming them. And it's a really heavy thought to have, but it is also a pretty doggone accurate one, and it shows up in a lot of places, not just something like that. Like we see it with people with alcohol, right? The wife that continues to buy the booze at the store and show up with the 12 packs or whatever. Like, what are you doing? Like, he's drinking a 12 pack every day and you're buying it for him? Like, no, stop that. Why are you doing that? Well, he gets angry if I don't. Yeah, of course he will. Like, no joke. But that's enabling behavior, right? You're not his mom, but you're helping to kill him. Like, stop.
Well, that's a great example. Okay, what we want our listeners to walk away with today is when, like what Nina just describes, this love, this desire to please is no longer the solution in a situation. When does compassion no longer serve the relationship? when does it no longer glorify God in the way we treat others? So we want to explore this, but before we do, I want to send you to our website, greaterimpact.org. We have a free PDF you can download where we talk about how to stop walking on eggshells. And we think it applies to this as well as many other topics we discuss. And so check it out in your free time. We think it'll help you out. All right, so if you don't do this well, you can miss an opportunity to create forward movement for yourself, for the person you love, and really just to love the way God intends us to love. So, all right, I have a different example, but along the same lines. It's from a time where I was really close with this person, and he was a friend from high school, and he was telling me about how he lost his job and what happened prior to, some events that happened prior to. And he's since gone on to gain new employment and has done well for himself. But during the time where he was at this prior job, he was engaged in an unhealthy relationship, really an illicit relationship. But he's one of those people that is well loved, well liked. He's good at what he does. He has charisma. He's, always the point person, right? In an organization, that type. And he told me about how it was a secret, but certain people knew in that organization what was happening. And for a long time didn't say anything to him, didn't confront him, didn't, expose him. Well, eventually, word got out and he lost his job over that situation because I think it was with another employee. And he obviously learned his lesson and, through the consequence grew from that. But what was amazing to me was how it went on for so long and how people just kind of turned the other direction, even though they knew what was happening. And I just, I want to understand and talk about why it is that we do that. And, I'm sure there's different reasons, but is there a way, or what would have been more healthy, in that situation for us to show up when we see things like this happening?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah. So, well, I used to be an HR manager. So my first thought is, okay, do we have rules about this? Apparently so, because he got fired, right?
Yeah.
So there's that piece of it. And so if, the people that knew were managers, they're undermining their own credibility by not saying something. And, this is going to sound terrible. Like nobody's going to want me to do HR for their company, but here's the deal. If you see somebody doing something like that, you want to go directly to them and say, hey, we don't act like this here. We don't do the thing. And that's showing leadership, because there's, the mindset of leadership. And then there's mindset of I'm a follower. Followers are like, yeah, let somebody else deal with it. Leaders. And at the same time, you got to be like, well, not meddling, right? But what does it look like to have leadership in the space? If there's a rule that says you don't do this thing,
right,
and somebody's doing this thing, a leader is going to protect the company. A leader is going to step into that space and say, hey, we don't act like this here. And that's what the purpose of community is, to have an identity that helps other people. And it makes me half nuts, because you see people in churches condone all sorts of things that shouldn't, they condone it by looking the other way,
right,
by not saying anything. And we don't, and we have to handle this really well, because we have to walk forward in love, but we have to confront someone who is sinning against us or sinning against God. I mean, we want to step into there and gently restore them, and hopefully they'll be open to that, right? But a lot of times people they take the avoid conflict route, because they don't know what to do. They don't know how to say it. They don't know what to say.
Right.
Yeah. And it's like, well, you're undermining credibility of like everything in the universe that you say you believe.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And oftentimes, if it's a person in a position of power, there's fear there that there's going to be some kind of repercussion or backlash that comes at us.
mhm,
And so that's another reason I think people hesitate is, well,
yeah.
to go against this person is to risk, me being, you know, dealt with. So
Mhm.
yeah, I've seen that as well, like you said, in churches as well as in organizations.
Well, you see it in families.
Yeah,
I hear this from somebody every single week. Well, I can't tell them that. Well, what do you mean you can't? You
yeah.
have the ability to form the words and get the say it. Well, they'll just get mad. Yes, they will. Absolutely. And
Mm-hmm.
like we're so afraid. I saw somebody talking the other night, and they said, we're all so easily offended, and being offended, we take offense. That's something we take, but we expect you look at how people talk about this now. We expect people to, say all these words and use all this politically correct language because we're going to take offense. Like, no, you're taking offense. You can decide that what I say about me and my people and whatever in my world is about you if you want to, but it's really your problem if you're taking offense. So people are afraid of being who they actually are, telling the truth, having some interactions, and yes, it is absolutely 100% spot on. Most of the time when you tell somebody, hey, I really love you, man, and I'm watching you do this thing and it concerns me. Can we talk?
Mm-hmm.
That's a what to say, that how you start that conversation,
Right. Mm-hmm.
and then when you get into the thing, it's be direct, be clear, be concise. I see you on Sunday morning sitting in the front pew, and yet I saw you this weekend with another woman and kiss her. Like, you're not lining up. What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to be mad. They are, boom, defensive. Absolutely. And so what do you do with that? Well, you write it out. You listen and you're like, yeah, sounds like I've, upset you and everything. I need you to know that's, we're representing the Lord here. And so I'm just
Mm-hmm.
asking you to pray about what you're doing because it concerns me. And yeah, that is meddling in somebody else's business, absolutely. But there's times when we want to do that. And if the church won't step up and do that in places where it's very clear sin, right? Like, that's a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're not going to get involved in that, well, shame on us. Because if there's no accountability, if nobody's going to call someone into question over that, that just enables that person even further to sin more.
Right.
And who knows? Like, I don't tend to jump into that stuff. If I observe something, I'll ask the Lord. I want that to be my go-to is, okay, God, is this for me to deal with? Do you want me to step into this space?
Mm-hmm.
Because he may have somebody else in that, or he may have a different timing on that.
Mm-hmm.
But there are times when we're called to confront, and
Right.
God doesn't need us to protect his reputation. He's awesome. He doesn't need us wandering around trying to control people's behavior. That's a whole different thing.
Mm-hmm.
But for us to ignore and to turn a blind eye is not helping anybody. That is not compassion. Compassion is, hey, I love you. What's going on?
You said that it's actually taking offense. There is actually a step that we're doing that's unhealthy when we decide that we can't deal with their reaction. And I think
Right.
that's important to note because that means you have to be really solid in your accountability
Yeah.
or in your
Yeah.
identity. And that can't bother you in this situation. And
Mm-hmm.
that can't be a hindrance to this entire situation. One thing I also want to say is a lot of times, especially with like our course members, we have a course online where we specifically help wives in these type of situations, and a lot of times the wives will comment on when is a good time, sort of like what you just mentioned, to make the transition to having compassion, allowing time, allowing growth, allowing the Holy Spirit to be the Holy Spirit, versus, okay, it's time to confront.
Mm.
I've struggled with this myself. And so I'm wondering if there are indicators, if there are clues for wives or anyone in any relationship to know when is that transition need to happen, because there is a time where we should be quiet and pray and wait and all the things. Because some of us move too quickly into confrontation. There's the other side of that.
Yeah, there's that.
There's a time for that. But, it'd be helpful to know how to decide to make that transition.
Yeah, so that's a thing, right? And if we look at Matthew 18, it's pretty doggone clear. You go to somebody who sinned against you, and depending on your position, depending on whatever it is, sin against you has multiple meanings. Like, think about that for a second, and your position, like sinned against your family, sinned against your children, sinned against whatever, your church. So you've got that happening. And if you win him over, you go and you talk to him about it. And if you win him over, then yay, that's the end of that, right? But how often does that happen? There's tons in the Bible about fools, tons. Yep. And I don't mean to be coming off as judgmental, because boy, howdy, do I have some foolish spaces in myself that I hate. And some I don't even know are there, right? Like clueless spaces. But so if it doesn't work, you go back to that person again, and you can take people with you, and you try again. And if it doesn't work again, then you take them to the church. And at that point, you treat them like a tax collector. What does that even mean? Well, Matthew wrote Matthew, and he was a tax collector. So it's like, well, what does it mean to be treated like a tax collector? Well, it either means you're given grace, or it means you are tossed out, right? Like, what does he mean by that? It's not clear. But when you look at what's in relationships, and if you look at the Bible in its entirety, if you keep, answering a fool in his folly, you're going to get more of the same, right? Yeah. But you also have to answer him in his folly, so you get less of the same. Like, no joke. You have to talk to God about those things. And so when people come to us and say, well, when do I? Well, is it affecting you? Is it affecting your family?
Yeah.
One of the big topics, that shows up is pornography addiction. And for most couples, pornography addiction does not affect the woman until he's got an addiction, and then he's got erectile dysfunction. Or before that, he's just not interested in her anymore, because he's gotten so far down the path that his mind needs something that she physically isn't. So that you've got this debauchery happening in somebody's brain. Well, that affects her. So at that point, that's when you would deal with things. Is it in my, and maybe she didn't even know about it, right?
Right.
One of the things that is useful too is knowing the balance between grace and truth, right?
Right.
So being able to say to someone, hey, I love you, and you can do that thing over there if you want to, but you gotta understand there's consequences to that. Like, there's no access here with me. If that's how you're going to do sexual stuff, then okay, you have at it. I want to glorify God in our marriage, and I want all of you or none of you. Like, that sounds pretty dramatic, but the women I know that have drawn that line in the sand, for the most part, their husbands, if they weren't too far gone down that addiction path, they've said, okay. And they've walked away from it because it was caught early enough, right? And you did a podcast with an author not too long ago on that topic.
I did. And one of the things he said was his wife did exactly what you just said. She was very kind. She didn't, go crazy or anything, or, get real, accusatory. She just kind of let him know that this was his issue. She would be there for him, but, it was his problem to solve. She was very firm with him. And I think having a roadmap is helpful for people in that situation, because oftentimes we see two extremes. Either they take it on fully as their problem, which is
Yep.
not healthy. They take
Yeah.
it personally and, do all the things they can to try to fix it. Or, they just completely judge that person and,
Mm-hmm.
want nothing to do with them. And I think both of those are unhealthy responses.
Yep.
So I love that grace and truth, yes, is possible
Oh, it
and
is.
necessary in these situations. And even Matthew 18, I heard a little bit of that in the way you describe that process, because it's not like the first time you're cut off as a tax
Right.
collector. There's several steps
Yeah.
involved before
Yeah.
that even happens, to give you that opportunity to correct the behavior. So I love that.
Well,
Okay,
we
go ahead.
don't understand what love is. We don't, James Dobson wrote a book a number of years ago. It's a parenting book called Love Must Be Tough. And well, actually, I don't know that it's parenting. That's Dare to Discipline. That's a book on love must be tough too. Oh, because we parenting, we think, well, if I love my kid, I'm going to be nice to them. Like, no, your job as a parent is to allow all sorts of mayhem in that kid's life to help them get tough and learn how to be independent and to grow them into being an advisor. And when I say allow all sorts of mayhem, it's like don't control their behavior, set rules, have consequences, but don't control, don't shame, don't do all that stuff that you can't take offense at what your kid does or doesn't do, right? It's not compassionate to, oh well, they're trying really hard, and so I'm not going to ground him even though he broke the rules. And no, if you have rules, nobody's going to take you seriously. They won't respect you, and then they won't respect themselves,
Right.
because and then with kids they'll have fear because they don't know where the parameters are. That's not okay. And in
Right.
relationships, we're more successful in relationships when we know what our no is and our yes is.
Mm-hmm.
And I would rather see people have some crazy boundaries than none at all, because they get walked all over. That's how that works. You get walked all over when you don't have boundaries. And what is it within us that is saying, well, I don't need them, love and sacrifice, and like, no, that's twisted scripture. Jesus said no. Like the disciples were like, all these people, and he's like, no, we're going to another town. Wait, what? We're so popular and things are awesome now. Yeah, we're leaving. Like he knew what he was about, and he was always about it. And you couldn't talk him in or out of anything. Well, his mother did once, and then we got wine, at that wedding. They're like that. But there's that one example, right? Mom, it's not my time yet. Or woman, it's not my time yet, or whatever he said. That would have been fun to see. But he basically knew what he was about. And that's what we need to do in relationships. Am I a person that am I going to stand by and watch someone slowly destroy themselves? Or am I going to say, hey, I want the best of you, and I want the best for us? And this thing you're doing, I mean, you're an independent person. You can keep doing that. Here's how it affects me. I'd like to see something different there. Right. And you're free to do whatever you want to do. But you need to know, right? And if it continues, like I had a client whose husband was a gambling addict, and he blew their entire life savings, like no joke, lied about it, like all this stuff. And she was brilliant. She was absolutely brilliant. She went to him, she found out about it. This went on for a little while. And she said, this needs to stop. I understand that you work for most of this money. I understand that you enjoy going to the club and doing this thing. And you can be about that if you want to, but we're not able to do the things that we want to do as a family, because financially you're creating a situation where we're both going to have to work longer. Like the dreams that we are planning are not going to happen because of this gambling addiction of yours. And he totally ignored that. They ended up having to look at some really hard financial numbers. And she said, here's the deal. You need help with this, and I love you, and I want you to leave and go get help live with your brother, whatever it is, but you can't be here and behave like this. You're modeling the wrong thing for our kids. And I want to see you be healthy. And I love you and I want to support you all the way through this. And he's like, how dare you? I pay for this house. She's like, yeah, I know. Absolutely, you do. And we want you here. So go check yourself in, whatever you need to do. And she had some resources for him and stuff, but it's being strong enough to say no when addiction, mental illness, alcoholism, just behaviors that are not useful. And those are big things. They start out small, and so then you have the opposite problem with the controlling personality of, oh my goodness, he, went to the bar after work today, and then they lose it all over that. It's like, well, okay, so it happens once, like, so
yeah,
really, what's in you that you're that afraid that that's going to turn into something that it's not, right? You don't deal with something unless it's a problem. If you're missing dinner 3 nights a week with your kids because of stopping off after work, that's one thing. If you do it once every 2 weeks or something to hang out with friends, like, who cares? Have a life, right? And if you have to control somebody else's behavior, that's a thing within you, thing within us.
Right. Yeah, and that brings me to the other question. What if it isn't really affecting you and it's really in their yard, it's their thing? What if it's like, some just crazy bad habit, that's not helping them, but it really is like, outside of, your world. Do you then say something, or
well, like what? Like what do you mean?
Oh, like the overeating thing. Say it's not your kid, but it's your spouse.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're not sick, but you can see they're drinking, a Coke every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's their thing, not really hurting you, but it's a bad habit and it's turning into 3 Cokes a day.
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever it is,
right? Yeah, so that's a great question. So let's say this person does not have diabetes,
right? Yes.
Yeah, they're just some average person. The first thing I would do is, if I noticed, and I'm just going to confess something here. People have asked me, hey, Nina, how much coffee have you had to drink today? Yeah. So, I'm sitting here.
Can coffee really hurt you? I don't know.
Yeah, well, too much of it's not good for you. Yeah. I mean, it's true. So, and the problem with health stuff is, everybody's reading all these things and everybody's got their own opinion of it, right?
Right,
So,
right.
Yeah, but there are certain things that we know, like drinking pop daily, lots of it, like eating hot dogs,
Right.
preservative stuff, chemicals. You put chemicals into your body, you're going to cause yourself to get sick eventually, right?
Right.
So what do you do? Well, you lead by example, first of all. Like and excuse me, do I have some planks in my own eye here? Like, I don't feel like I have the right to say anything about, and my husband doesn't drink pop hardly ever, but if he was drinking it daily, like, who am I I can't say anything about that because I'm guzzling 2-3 cups of coffee every day. And I know that's not good for me.
Yeah.
And I'm not even trying to stop doing that. Like,
okay.
Watch some listener send me an email going, thanks for leading by example. I should probably, now I feel like I got to stop drinking coffee. Like, I did buy
me too.
I know.
Is coffee really bad?
Oh man, I think the Lord's been working this on me, because I actually got some decaf, and it's not terrible instant, because I just love it so much. And I have a friend of mine who used to be addicted to Pepsi, and she always had a Pepsi on her, and she would go like 6 of those a day. And I finally said to her, I said, do you feel okay? Like, physically, do you have a lot of energy? No. And I have a headache all the time. And I said, have you ever asked your doctor about how much pop you drink? Like, maybe that might, she's like, well, I've got an appointment next week. Maybe I'll do that. So she did. And she's like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. I'm gonna have to quit and blah, blah, blah. And then she quit. And about 3 months later, because it was awful while she was quitting, it was so bad.
Yep.
And then she talked about it. She's like, this is the best thing ever. I feel so much better.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like that too when I gave up drinking Diet Coke, because 30 years ago, that's what I did instead of coffee in the morning. So yeah, but you got to go about it. You got to, in the what to say department, you
Right.
know, you gotta be led to go there,
Right.
and you got to do it in love.
Right.
And it cannot be from a heart of control, right? Or fear.
Right.
Yeah, that's not the Lord.
Yeah. No, that's a great example of where compassion actually works better than saying, nothing. And so I love that, because you did it in a way where it was like you were concerned for her. You weren't trying to force her to stop with her Pepsi. You just asked her a question, and it led her down the path of truth. So that was a great example. So, okay, so we've talked about a lot of things today. Wow. I hope that the message that you're hearing is compassion is necessary. We are commanded to love our brothers and sisters, give them grace, give them time, opportunity for growth. But there is a point, especially if it's affecting you directly, where you have to step into the space and say something. And just to summarize, love is confrontation. You have to confront in love. That's what Matthew 18 is all about. So make sure you're being led by God in it, of course. Make sure you've, like Nina said, looked at the plank in your eye. If you have the same issue that they have, then it might not be a good idea at that moment. But, if you've done your work and you've cleaned your side of the street, then, and God says go, then go. If there's fear, ask yourself, what's going on there? Am I taking offense? Am I, not solid in my identity in Christ? Usually there's something going on there, but ignoring the problem isn't helpful. So take that into account, but always have a good combination of grace and truth in these situations. And that's probably the best takeaway for me is, compassion or enabling, one way to defend that and avoid that is to apply grace and truth together. So anyway, this was fun. Thanks, Nina, for all of the tips. And if you're interested, check out our next episode, like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube, and share if you have friends you think that this would benefit them in any way. But we appreciate you joining us, and we hope to see you next time.